So what I'm doing right now, I kind of put two of those rods together. So I'd spend some time smoothing these out. But what I'm doing right now, and the ones at school, you'll have square ones, so in different sizes. I'm using this soldering iron to kind of weld or fuse the light there. That into the cup, okay? So what I'm doing there is I'm using the soldering iron to weld this into the cup all the way around, and then I'm going to go and reinforce this more with filling up this area here with more wax, so this is reinforced, okay? All right, so again, I'm going to actually change. I'm going to feed from below, and I want to take it right off of the top. I kind of have a hairline here where I could weld it back together again, and I've already cut most of this free. Be very careful cutting through wax. It's soft, this wax soft in a sense, but it grabs. So all of a sudden you slip, and if your finger's there, so be very careful, okay? Cut away from you. But anyway, all right. Now, also I would say, maybe in aluminum this would be fine to be this thick, but I would start over if I were doing it in bronze. And actually the original intention of this was to sculpt on this wax some more and maybe make a rubber mold, but that's not happening anytime soon, so let's do this demo. Anyway, so now I've got that off. So now when I cast it, the investment will come up right through the piece, okay, so there won't be a bubble trapped, and then I can weld this, maybe, if it was thinner, back onto the surface of it. So I save that, and I'm going to gate and vent that as well, either in another mold or with the same mold. Anyhow, and again, I would spend time cleaning this up. So anyway, this is just a rough demo kind of thing. So the other things are core pins, and again, I'm going to use these 12D nails for that. And again, I mean, I'm kind of looking at areas where I can shove them, and I'm thinking about at least 3 points, so that doesn't shift back and forth. And like, I wouldn't want to shove them right into the eye or something like that, because it'd be hard to clean up. So I'm going to leave that area alone. Maybe in the cheek here I could clean up easily, but definitely back here, I can push that in. I have a core pin. Okay, remember, we don't want anything sticking out. We want to keep this mold as small as possible, like maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches at most, thicker than the shape of the form. So I take this guy, I'm going to shove him, so I'm kind of like creating a tripod kind of thing. So that gives some support to the thing. And I might take the hot tool or even my fingers and go around that so the investment doesn't go in there. We got 3. And then maybe 1. Let's give him 1 in the cheek just so it's a tough look. Now, a lot of times you can embed stuff. If I was using, these are just steel and I'm going to cut them out. But if you're using stainless, you can actually embed things, include things in your wax that stick out like that. So they have to stick out so that they get embedded in the plaster, so the wax is going to disappear. But if I was these will be stuck in the bronze. And you could go with steel. It'll corrode between the metals. Stainless works pretty well if you're embedding bronze things in there. Stainless doesn't react as much, but steel and bronze kind of react to each other. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of more information on that, but that should be enough to kind of hold it. So I got like nails in there. I could probably put another one over here, but poor guy. Anyway, all right, so here's I dripped a little bit. I basically welded those 3 of these into place. Let's see. You can kind of see how those are attached right there, welded in place. And then I poured some molten wax in there. You can also just use a soldering iron and weld in and fill the cup. I'm letting that, so I shoved it in some cold water to help cool it down. But you want these to be relatively smooth. Again, I would use, these are stuck together really quickly, but you want these connections not to be all rough. You want everything to flow. A couple of reasons. You want the molten metal to flow nicely, but you also don't want little, if this is all rough and textured, all those little bits of plaster, sand, investment mixture is going to break off and flow into there too and become embedded in your casting. So I would spend some time smoothing this out a little bit more. And kind of making sure they flow. If you also think about piping that you've seen, like the pipes curve, they don't hit hard angles because it disrupts the flow. And again, you would be using, I know these are round stuck together, but you would be using square gates or rectangle gates that helps keep the molten metal from swirling. All right, so I'm going to see if I can weld this onto this guy. Very serious. All right, so you can use some cushion or even paper or something to kind of cushion it. I'm just going to set it on here for now because I'm not worried about it. If you don't want to damage the bottom of your wax, I'm flipping up like this, and then I'm going to take the soldering iron and I'm kind of fussing these a little bit so they're in the right spots. Still got to bend them a little bit. And to go and weld them in. Now be careful, you don't create, I know, I never cleaned up this surface in the first place, but be careful, if you do make drips, clean them up. Don't be like, oh, I'll clean it up in the metal. Once it's in the metal, it's a little harder to grind metal than it is to scrape some wax off the side of something and clean it up. You want to go into it with as close as what you want in the wax. And you also, sometimes you have to, I'm just going to kind of tacking this in place right now. You really want to have these secure. It's best, to get this hot, get the spot hot, and click it on. But I'm going in a little bit at a time, and then I'm going to go underneath and really weld those in place. You do not want this breaking off when we pour the investment in it. It's a bad scene. Anyway, so I'm going to continue that all the way around, and I'll even take some wax and warm it up in my fingers and kind of fill in gaps and even reinforce where there's overhang, and especially on the inside, and fill that in and make it as strong as possible. All right? So we've got our cup attached, and I've let this cool a bit, or a good amount, because if it's soft and I flip it over, the weight of the head, especially because I have this too thick, might cause that to break, and then the other thing is I've attached these here, and I've attached these with a lot of curve to them and tried to make it as secure as possible, mainly because of all that weight. Now I also like the idea of it flowing visually into there easier, but depending on who you talk to, some people will say you should taper your gate at the end a little bit. One, this will give you less surface area that you're, less surface area that you have to cut and clean off and match up, and also it will, jet somehow. That compression right at the end there will turn the bronze into a molten metal into a jet going into the mold. I don't know about that, but well, it does give you less material to have to cut off. And the other thing is, now don't suddenly go like, oh, hey, less material to cut off, I should use one of these thin ones. The problem with that, one, even if you have a small piece, it can work if it's a small piece, but the molten metal cools down really quickly, starts to cool down, especially in these smaller, thinner pieces. Now, molds are going to be hot and everything like that, so you want a mass that's going to stay warm. You want these, I like to have these as relatively short as possible. Sometimes people put on very massive gates, big 1 inch by 1 inch gates, and it depends. Like this piece, you could probably do something like that, but I'm stingy. Especially if this is for a plaster investment. If you were going to do ceramic shell, definitely you want stronger, thicker gates because of the dipping process, but that's a whole nother process. So anyway, I've let these cool a little bit, and I don't want them to be flexed, so I'm going to flip this over, and I kind of want to be ready. It's going to be mounted. I'm going to mount this on this board, and we're going to end up building a chicken wire cage. I want to make sure the chicken wire cage can fit on here, and then tar paper over that, and then that gets plastered down. But anyway, right now, if you look at this, let's turn this, it's probably tippy that way. So I want to be wary of that. So I'm going to put a vent, even though I'm using this same thing here, I'm going to put a vent right there to kind of create stability. Not just, it'll be a vent, it'll be allowing air to escape, Remember, these feed metal in, and vents, things that don't go to the cup, feed air and gases out. Okay, so I'm gonna weld those on there so that that's not so tippy, just to begin with for stability. Now I could also use some wooden dowels and cut them down. Those work nicely. Those will burn out, thin ones. But anyway, I'm gonna get this stabilized, and then I'll show you a little bit about the other vents.